Hi there, my name is Jimmy G and I'm a comic book colorist and letterer. Today we're going to be talking about setting up your workspace and tools for comic book coloring and flatting in Clip Studio Paint. So let's get into it. Okay, one of the first things you're going to notice in Clip Studio Paint is there are a lot of options. There's lots of windows, lots of menus, lots of buttons, and it can be a little bit daunting when you first start with Clip Studio. But luckily, the workspace is very customizable. So this is a personal thing. You're obviously going to want to find which tools you use the most, remove the ones you don't, or maybe hide them behind each other or inside each other so that we can be more efficient with our movements and with our tool selections. So up here we've got the subtool, which is the options underneath the tool that you have selected from here. So if we go to the selection tool, there's lots of different ones here. The line tool, there's different ones here. The magic wand tool, there's different ones. And then underneath this is the default window. We have tool properties, some different options, brush sizes, the color wheels here, hiding behind that, different color selection options. Over here, we have the navigator window, layer properties, search layers, animation cells. We have the actual layers themselves. These are really important. History. That's just showing you how I set up this document. And then auto action. See? Brilliant. Now there's lots of different menus here, most of which you may not ever use. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at ways to customize this area. I'm going to show you how I set mine up, and then we'll get into the tools. So all these bars are collapsible, but then some of them have two arrows. One is to minimize that bar, so you have just little icons for each different thing. You pop that back out again, as you can see. So what we've got there is you've got those first few tools that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. You've minimized that. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all of these are the menus that are hidden behind that color wheel. So you can minimize the bar, but you can also completely collapse it if you don't want to see it at all. That's going to increase your workspace, but it's going to hide the tools that you might want to get to. So do that with this one here as well. That's your general toolbar. Obviously got the program options up there. Just across here, you've got the navigator. This is the same, so you can open this up and you've got quick access, material downloads, material background. These are, they all sound fantastic, but may not be the kind of thing that you use very often. Clip Studio Paint comes with a few options preloaded. This is their default view. So if you go to Window, Workspace, reset to default, we'll get back to where we are. So you can also load some of their presets here. Illustration, comic, by category. So we're going to click on illustration here. So as you can see, things have moved around. These tools here are all hidden because you don't like to use them. This is quite a neat little setup. I do quite like this, but it's not exactly how I do mine. Window, Workspace, comic. Okay, takes you back to where we were before. Okay, Window, Workspace, by category. Okay, there we go. And this is even more confusing. And unfortunately with Clip Studio Paint, as fantastic a tool as it can be, it's not always the most user-friendly tool. So my workspace looks a little bit something like, and this is what my workspace looks like. Now, as you can see, what I've done is I've sort of compacted all of my tools and my options that I use very regularly into this one right-hand side, because I am right-handed. So I can get to my tools easily, but then I can get away from them when I need to. I can just draw and colour in this area. So obviously I've got my quick access toolbar here. These are some downloaded brushes, so you might not have these to start with. Paint bucket, eyedropper, the auto select or the magic wand tool. This is called the figure tool. This contains one of the most important tools we'll end up using. We'll get onto that in a second. Selection tool, the move layer, operation, move, zoom. Now the shortcuts for these, if you hover over the top of them, you can see that. So if I press Z, I'm going to click on Z. If I press it, it's going to select the tool. If I then select the eyedropper and I just hold on to the Z key, it gives me the zoom icon. But if I let go, it takes me back to the last tool. That's fantastic. Then we've got pens, pencils, brushes, airbrush, decoration, etc. down here. Foreground and background colors. I've got the layers here. Now when I work, I have quite a lot of layers because I do like to work non-destructively, so I like to be able to go back and edit everything all the time. I'm very nervous watching people working on just one layer. Behind that menu, I have layer properties. It's not something I access very often, but it's something that occasionally I need to get to. I don't want to be trawling through window, find this. So it's just there, so I can quickly nip onto it when I need to. The color wheel up here is obviously very important. Behind that are some other color options in the history bar. Not something that I touch too often, but color wheel, obviously super important. Now I have the CMYK slider. The reason I have this is because, unfortunately, Clip Studio Paint isn't the best for CMYK. It doesn't convert it very well, doesn't really work in it very well. It's much easier to work in RGB inside Clip Studio Paint, inside Clip Studio Pro. And the reason I have these CMYK sliders is so that if I'm selecting things, I can look at them and think, is that going to print well? I can have a quick check on here to make sure what my K values are, but we'll get into that in another video. Underneath that I have my subtool and tool property option bars. Now these help me edit the options on these different tools here. We'll do that in a second. And then we have the brush size window, because obviously we change the brush size quite often. Now I do have, I'll just quickly get a brush here for you. So I have marker pen, go to a layer that's actually workable here. I do actually have an option on the side of my display tablet to quickly change this, but you can use this to change this here, 30, so you can see the brush size is changing. That's 100, 200, there we go. So undo those. One of the most important things we're going to talk about today is anti-aliasing. Now at first sight these two look very much the same. They're both the same color and they look pretty much identical. Not as in line as I'd like them to be, but there we go. Okay, so now the left hand side here has anti-aliasing turned off and the right hand side has anti-aliasing turned on. This is really important when it comes to comics, especially in the flattening process, because we need to make sure that our selections are nice and clean. And the way this is affected by anti-aliasing, I'll show you now. So if we zoom in on the side that has anti-aliasing off, we can see here that the separation between the blue and the red is this hard, jagged line. So when we go to select things, you can pick that up, and as you can see when we select it, I'm going to zoom out, see it selects both circles because they're the same colour. This has this perfectly selected. It's just the red, just the blue. And if we go over to anti-aliasing on, we're going to quickly just click the deselect button. You can zoom in and see the difference. So as you can see here, what the program does is when you fill something with anti-aliasing, when you use a tool with anti-aliasing switched on, it has this smooth gradient. So you have what looks like a slightly, as you can see here when we zoom in a little, it starts to get a little jagged. And here it just looks a little bit smoother. But when we select it, that red in the middle, we're not selecting every single pixel. So when you come to flat a page or color a page, you need those selections to be very, very precise. Otherwise, slowly but surely, that margin of error is going to build up, and you're going to have big problems selecting the right areas and getting them colored correctly. So, okay, so that quick explanation of anti-aliasing. Now, anti-aliasing can be switched on and off inside, not the subtool menu, but inside the tool property menu. Not all tools have it, but selection tools have it, and most of the fill tools have it as well. So when we go, what we need to do, whenever we're using any sort of tool, once they're set up this way, unless you change the settings again, they'll remain the same. So what you need to do is every time you use a tool, just quickly click on whichever tool you're going to use. So here's the selection tool. So you go to, if we're on ellipse, which is what we're on now, it says, you can see here, anti-aliasing, black, just the solid round circle. These will all add more anti-aliasing. You can see here it's none, weak, middle and strong, and we want none. No anti-aliasing at all. Aspect type and adjust angle after fix should both be off, and how to create should always be select new. So when we make a nice circular or elliptical selection like this, we can zoom in, and then when we fill this, when we use the fill bucket tool, again we can go to fill bucket, we make sure we're on refer to editing layer, and then all the anti-aliasing is off. We don't want anti-aliasing, no anti-aliasing. Color margin is 0, which we'll explain in just a second, and then we can just pick any other color, nice bright green. We can click on this area, and as you can see, because the anti-aliasing was on, it hasn't quite filled up to the red line. Okay, the anti-aliasing here, however, is off on that selection, so we have this solid connection, which is exactly what we want. If we could just go back, get rid of that green, and I'll show you how this is important. If we take the selection tool again, circular, go over here, and then if we use the paint bucket tool with that same green, we can fill this. As you can see, go straight up to that flat layer, and then when we're making flats, if we then click on the red, we'll get a perfect green circle with no blurred edges or loose pixels in different colors. There we go. So again, just make sure your anti-aliasing is off on all of your tools from the beginning of the work you do, otherwise you won't realize until much later on, and it is almost impossible to fix it once you've taken too many steps. So in the flattening process, this is super important. Some tools simply don't have anti-aliasing because the nature of the tool, so some of the brushes with textures and patterns to them, it's impossible to turn off anti-aliasing, or it would just ruin the effect of the brush if you could. So we're going to just quickly go back to this, deselect it. Okay, so remember, anti-aliasing off is exactly where we want to be. Anti-aliasing on, no. Very bad. Now, color margin. I'm going to quickly talk about color margins. 2 red circles, again the same as before, and they look almost identical. Now we're going to go to our auto select tool. Okay, we're going to make sure we refer to editing layer only to select, and then we're going to go to tool properties. Here we see this option for color margin. Now if we select this tool, if we have the color margin set to, let's say, 10, we're on selection, make sure we're on the right layer. If we click on this, we select both of those because they're identical, aren't they? Not so. If we turn down the color margin to 0, click on this one, and as you can see, we've only selected this left hand circle. So if we use the eyedropper, I'll show you why. We'll deselect, click on the eyedropper here. If we look over here at the CMYK values, we're at 0%, 90%, 98%, 100%, 0% for this left hand circle. If we move over to the right hand circle and click it, there's a very small difference. You can see that we're at 0, 100, 100, 0. So we go backwards and forwards. There's just a 2% difference in our magenta between those two colors. Now, this may not seem too important, and it may not look too different, but when you're flatting, when you've got lots and lots of different selections on the page, that is going to make a huge difference if you're trying to pick certain areas to recolor when you're coloring the page, or for any colorist who's trying to color the page. So if we go back to the auto select tool, we need to make sure that color margin is at 0. This also is important on the fill tool. So again, refer only to editing layer. We're going to go to our tool properties, color margin 0, because if we have a color margin, it will have the exact same problem in that there'll be an ever so slight difference when we fill things. It may not be immediately obvious, but this will be a bigger problem later on. Okay, so the main tools that I use within Clip Studio Paint, because I use it mostly for flatting, are up here. They are the selection tools. Okay, so we have rectangles, ellipses, lassos, polylines. Don't really use the selection pen in the erase selection or the shrink selection, but these are good for all sorts of things, especially the rectangles. polylines. Below here we have the figure tool. Now, for reasons I don't fully understand, Clip Studio Paint has hidden a really important tool underneath here, which I think should really be inside the selection tool area. But they've put it in figure tool, so we just work with what we've got. If you come down here, you'll see straight line, curve, polyline, continuous curve, and this option here called lasso fill or lasso fill, depending on where you're from. Now this is an awesome tool. We click on to make sure we're using it. We're going to go to the tool properties. Again, we're going to make sure the anti-aliasing is off. Blending mode is normal. The opacity, this is very important, is 100, because this will end up affecting the selections you're about to make in exactly the same way that the color margin will. And I'll show you that in a second. But if we go click back onto this plain white page, pick a nice bright color, go to lasso fill tool. We're going to draw around, and then as soon as we let go, it's going to fill that selection. When you're making flats, this is going to save you so much time. You will thank the Clip Studio Paint gods for introducing this tool. Now, if we just undo this, I'll show you what I mean by the opacity. We turn down the opacity just by 6%. We go here. Now see the colour that we have that we're filling it with is 0, 98, 100, 0. That's what we have the colour set to. But if we now go to pick up that colour, it drops. So it's 0, 96, 100, 0. So we've lost 2% inside that magenta. And that's because of that tiny difference in opacity. And we can't have that, because that means that every time you make a selection, if we then go to, let's pick this nice bright green, as you can see here, it's 65, 0, 100, 0. What we should be able to do is draw straight inside there and get the whole thing. But as you can see, very slight difference in the color, in the tint of this green. So if I go to pick up this, that's the color that we were using. But if we go over here, it changes, because it's been affected by the color underneath it, because the opacity of this selection that we made isn't 100%. So if we undo that, go back to our lasso fill tool, turn the opacity up to 100%, you'll see as we draw through here, pick up this green, that's our original 67, 0, 100, 0. If we then go to the area where it overlaps with the red, it's exactly the same. And because the anti-aliasing on it is off, we have this nice hard edge between the two colours, so that we can go to the wand, pick up the green, pick up the red, pick up just the white. Fantastic. So lasso fill, auto select, and then we have the selection tools. Okay, so inside the selection tools, we're just going to quickly undo all of these things. We've got a nice clean sheet to work on. Going to go to the selection tools. Some of these will be used more than others, but rectangle tool, if you are lucky enough to have fantastic, well done line art with perfectly straight panels, which is very rare, you'll be surprised, you'll be able to use this. So what you can do is you can make this rectangle. Again, we're making sure that inside the rectangle, anti-aliasing is off, all the other options are off, and it's always select new. Now you can either click on the fill tool with your nice green and fill that up, as you can see, nice hard edge. Or if we undo that, we can go to our selection tool, and Clip Studio Paint has a funky little option just underneath here. This is deselect. Redo that quickly, and then various other options, but the one really useful one is this here, fill. So instead of having to go from the last, so instead of having to, let's say, take our selection, draw our rectangle, press on the bucket, fill it up, deselect, make a new one. Oh, we undid that instead of deselecting it, but we can then make another one and fill that up, or pick a new color and fill it up. be quite tedious because we keep having to change between tools. We want to be as efficient as possible. So what we can do, we just quickly clear this. So we've got nothing on here and deselect it. We're going to go to our rectangle, draw this, press fill, and then we're going to get the rectangle. We're going to draw another, we're going to deselect it, and we're going to press on fill. It's going to fill it again. We can just click up here outside of the selection, make another selection and press fill. Now this is just filling the selection that you've made. What you can do is, if we just go back to a nice clean sheet, there we go. We're going to draw one here, use this fill, and then we're going to draw another one here, fill it again. Now if we draw one more like this, what we want, now let's say we want to fill just this white area without affecting this green. If we press the fill bucket here, it's going to fill this entire selection with green or any color that we select. So if we want to fill it with red, let's say, we want this white area to be red and not affect the green, we can't use this because this will just fill the whole selection. We go back, undo. If we then use the fill bucket tool from here instead of the shortcut here, we can then click on the white and it fills just the white area that we've selected and doesn't affect this green. That's going to become very useful when we start making selections for panels and things. And as you can see, because the anti-aliasing is off, we have these fantastic clean selection lines. Okay, so that's the rectangular selection. Go back, go to the selection tool, click on the subtool selections. Rectangle, we have the ellipses, which circles, and if we press on shift, we can make sure that the circle stays perfectly circular. If we click on, there we go, as you can see. Same goes for the rectangle tool. Click on here, we can make sure that it's perfectly square by holding on to shift. We can go to the lasso tool. This is where we can draw around like this. We can either draw straight up to meet it, or we can draw around, and then if we just lift our tool off, what it'll do is it'll draw a straight line between the opening and the closing of that selection. This can be quite useful as it works the same with this lasso fill tool. Now going back to the selection tool, polyline, this is good for oddly shaped panels. So if we click on here, we start this selection, we can move all around with it in a nice straight line, and we can make crazy shapes, and then we can go back and you can see here the icon changes ever so slightly. It goes from this plus to plus with a little circle. That means we're closing the selection, and then again we can use the fill bucket here to fill it up, and then we can just click outside the selection. We don't have to press any more buttons. We can click here, 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 make another crazy selection, and then we can click on the fill bucket, select another color just on the white. We've got that nice clean selection. We can also then click on the red to fill it if we want to. Okay, so we go back to our selection tool, subtool selection. Again, I don't really use the selection pen or the erase selection or the shrink selection. We, inside here, just the lasso fill tool for me. The auto select or the magic wand, refer edited layer only to select. Not the best way of saying it, but what this does is this means that when you pick up selections, it's only going to pick it from the layer here that you are actually working on. So you can, and that's highlighted and indicated to you by this little tool icon here. So you can see here, there's lots of different options in Clip Studio Paint. Again, not the most user-friendly, but once you get your head around it, is a fantastic program, especially for flatting. I use it all the time. Refer to other layers to select, selection for referred layers. We'll get into other layers to select in the video we do about the actual flatting process for this. It's kind of a shortcut, and it can save a little bit of time, but can also be very messy and end up just causing you a world of hurt if you don't know how to use it effectively. Eyedropper for picking up different colors. So if we're making one selection here, oh sorry, we'll go to something, just press escape. Go to something a little easier to use. Rectangle, If we want to fill this with this green that we're using, then we make another selection over here, and we've accidentally collected another one. We can always use the eyedropper tool. If we want it to be exactly the same, we must click on the green, and then we can fill or use the paint bucket here. Another way to do this, if we go back to our empty selection, is if you have the fill bucket selected, you don't need to press the eyedropper, and you don't need to use any of the other tools. What you can do is, using the fill bucket, if you hover over the color that you want to select, if you press the Alt key, it'll become the eyedropper automatically within that tool, and then you can click and then fill. So again, if we just undo that, select a random color. We don't want this red, we want this green. Paint bucket, press Alt, becomes the eyedropper tool, click on there, changes the color for us, and we can use it where we need it. This also works with the lasso fill tool. So let's say we've got this nice bright red, we do make our selection, we realize, oh, we've got the wrong color. What we can do is we can undo it, hover over the green, press Alt, becomes the eyedropper tool, goes back to the green we want, and then there we go. Okay, so that's basically how I set up my tools in my workspace. Okay, so that's how I set up my tools in my workspace exclusively for flatting. There's some other options here which we haven't got into. They're more for colouring. We'll touch on those when we actually get around to doing some colouring inside Clip Studio Paint. One thing I didn't mention is we had a navigator window up in this corner when we had the default settings, and you'll notice that it's gone. I do actually use the navigator window when I'm flatting and colouring, so I can keep track of where I'm up to, but I have that on a separate separate monitor, which is just above my graphics tablet, so I can more easily take a quick glance at the whole page instead of having to zoom in and out crazily all the time and giving myself vertigo. I could just lift my head, look at the screen, and get straight back to it. That's it. So if I missed anything, let me know in the comments and I'll try and make a quick video about it. But for now, if you've enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you're feeling really crazy about things. We'll see you in the next one.